Welcome back to MVM. Today we have a Kickstarter preview. This one is for A War of Whispers from Starling Games. This is a 2 to 4 player area influence, area control a little bit, but definitely with some wagering betting.
Yeah, so it is a 2 to 4 player game. If you guys are fans of a Game of Thrones, especially the HBO series, which we both are,
Yeah.
You'll know that there's all these different warring factions or groups or families that are fighting over Westeros. This is kind of the same feeling.
But
Yeah.
you don't play as those
Yeah.
houses. You play as more of kind of like the
Little
Finger or Varys type characters. You're basically kind of controlling things or sort of showing your loyalties behind the scenes one way or another.
Yeah, you're being super manipulative over 4 rounds, trying to bet or wager on which one of these houses is ultimately going to win at the end. Because at the end, it's all about area control, depending upon which one of these families owns cities that are on this map. There's several different locations on the board that house cities, and depending upon your loyalties to these specific families is going to be your in-game score. Now, through the game, you're going to be manipulating these possibly, but at the start of the game, everyone's going to have 5 different loyalty tokens in front of them, and they're placed randomly face down on your board. Each of these has a multiplier underneath of it, telling you how many points that particular faction or family is going to score at the end of the game. So you are allowed to look at these, but you're not allowed to place them at the start of the game. And they're always going to be face down. However, there's a time in the game where you can actually swap 2 of them. This is the cool portion about the game. You always know which families you're trying to manipulate, but you're not trying to let the other players know what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're going to be sharing the work here. You can kind of sit back and watch all the other players at the board manipulate the empires. As long as you're keeping track of where things are headed, you can just play a little bit of a role in that respect as long as you maneuver your loyalties or these wagers appropriately.
Yeah, so there is a little bit of deduction within the game trying to figure out what people are trying to do over 4 rounds. So at the start of the game, what's going to happen is you're going to place the board in the center. Now I'm going to say this is a prototype. A lot of the things that we've seen in the actual rules look a little bit different than the game itself. But basically, the game that we're going to show you right now is the same game that you're going to be backing.
Yeah, the board, as you can see here, is this interesting round board, and it has the whole structure all the way around of how the game is going to play round to round.
Yeah.
We also have player boards. This is largely going to just house your wagers on each of the houses. You're going to also have these tokens. These tokens are your agents. They are going to be what you place out on the board to enact some abilities that are around the board, as well as some of these cards and cubes up here. The cubes represent the banners for the different houses. Those are going to go out and basically be the pieces that determine the area influence and control. The cards are things that you're able to acquire when you influence or interact with certain houses. You might be able to gather cards. Those are cards that you can play to really sort of change things up.
When you look at the map, you're going to notice that there's 5 basic regions on the map, and each of them have smaller territories. These are the home regions of each of the 5 different families. Some of them are going to start with banners already in them, depending upon some of the banner locations that are on here. Also, you're going to notice a couple different icons on the board. You're going to see towers, which are basically extra defense structures for whatever army controls that or home location that controls that specific area. You have the cities, which are the actual victory points at the end of the game, depending upon the multiplier of the family that owns that particular location. And you're going to see a couple different huts. All of these locations tie into this giant circle that you see around the outside base. Now, this is really cool. During the course of the game, you're going to be placing your agents on these, I don't want to call them worker placement spots, but that's basically what they are.
Kind of feel that way.
They're spots that allow you to take actions with that particular house that you place them in, and you're always going to go around in clockwise fashion. So blue will happen before red, green, yellow, and brown, and that's going to happen round after round, and each of these different families has different actions depending upon which one of these banners that you place your agent on.
Yeah, a lot of the actions from empire to empire are similar. You're always going to have a sheriff, a steward, a marshal, and a chancellor. However, some of the abilities, while, like I said, similar, will vary just a little bit, so it's going to give you different ways to influence what's going on the map.
So once everyone randomly places all of their loyalty tokens, again, these are face down and won't be revealed until a very specific portion of the game. Once the board is seated with all the different banners, you're going to pick a first player. Going to get the first player token, and then they're allowed to take one of their agents and place it on any of the empty locations around the board. They simply choose one of the locations and they place on that specific space. And you're going to keep going around the board until everyone at the table has placed 2 of these tokens. So for now, we're just going to seed the board with some random ones around here. All right, and then the order of the round happens like this. Once you've deployed all the agents in round 1, then you're going to move to the blue banner and act these from left to right. However, something really cool happens here. If you're the banner that's furthest to the right and there's no one in front of you, you get to take all of these actions leading up to that, meaning that if David had taken this spot, David would get to take not only this one, but this one because there's empty spots to the left. However, if he's not located in the spot, I would be able to take this action, and this action. When you take the actions, you always go from left to right and then from top to bottom of each of those specific locations.
Yeah, so what that means too is if by chance you happen to place in one of the empires on the Chancellor position, which is the rightmost position, and no one else places in that empire, you get to do all of those actions, the Sheriff, the Steward, the Marshal, and then the Chancellor.
There's a variety of different actions that happen when you go to these particular locations. A lot of them allow you to place additional banners in those particular areas that you control. Those areas that you can control are any of the areas of that particular family where no other banner or opposing army is present, or any of the locations that you may be able to control in other people's locations. A lot of these allow you to gain gain banners depending on how many huts you have, how many towers you have, and so forth. Some of them allow you to draw cards from that particular faction's card deck. These cards do a variety of different things, can be used at any time during your turn. When you look at the anatomy of a card is always broken into 3 different sections. First, you have in the upper left-hand corner what family that card belongs to. But the 3 different sections tell you what you get to do when you expend this card. If it has 1 icon, you simply have to just expend the card itself in order to use that ability. If it has 2 icons, that means you have to expend this card plus 1 other card of that same color. And then at the bottom are some very varied ones. These are basically this card plus a different colored card, and it will tell you right here at the bottom. All these are various different actions and abilities that you get to take on your turn.
Yeah, it's really cool because all of those cards, depending on the family, the first 2 actions are identical. So you'll, after playing the game a few times, you're going to get to know the standard type of actions that each of the families do. And then that bottom action, like Jeremy was saying, depends on what other type of card you're matching it with. And these cards ask for a very specific one, and those abilities are truly sort of game bending.
Some of the actions allow you to physically move and attack other locations. Attacking in this game is very simple. You'll notice that there are no dice at the table. There's no randomness to the attacks. The attacks are simply numbers, a numbers game. If you have more than the other player, you're going to win that battle. However, some of the locations will have defensive areas in there, and you get to decide as the attacker, first you have to be adjacent to the location, then how many you want to send into that location. If I want to send all 4 of them, it'd be 4 against 2 plus their 1 tower defense, meaning that I would lose 3, and they would lose their 2, and my guy would stay in that location. Now, if you're moving your armies out of locations that aren't your native homelands, you always have to have 1 left behind in the territory that you're leaving from.
Yeah, exactly. As you take over land, you have to sort of effectively or thematically set up camp, if you will, by leaving a trail.
Supply lines along the way. And then the Chancellor is a special position. It always allows you to attack no matter which one of these locations, but then it allows you to pick up your token and swap it with any one of the other locations in that area, meaning you get to take a secondary action.
Yeah, as long as there is another agent. It can be your agent or it can be another player's agent, but you can swap with that and immediately take that action again. This also ensures that people can't just sit on those Chancellor locations for very long throughout the game because, as we said earlier, it allows you to do a lot of the actions if there's no one else blocking you.
And you're simply going to go in a clockwise fashion all the way around the board until you get to the very end. Now, you're going to notice after each one of these specific colored locations or families, you're going to see the word supply, meaning that each one of these locations has a supply check at that point, meaning that you can have any more than 4 banners in that location. If you have more than 4 banners, any of the additional banners go back to the supply.
Right.
And once you get to the end, you're simply going to move that marker, and it's going to signify the end of the round. At the end of the round, every player has to discard down to 5 cards if they have more than 5 cards. And then this is going to move to the next player. Now, players have an option. This is great. You may expose and swap loyalties. This is one of the interesting parts of the game. As we said, at the very beginning of the game, all the loyalties are face down. So no one knows who you're betting on winning or which families you're betting on winning at the end of the game. At this point, you are allowed to swap 2 different ones. So if I was thinking that I didn't like my red position, I wanted to move them up higher, I could take these 2, expose them to the other players, and lock them into place for the rest of the game. However, other players now know what you're trying to manipulate on the board.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a game in which you want to determine, do I want to show where my loyalties lie, or do I want to wait? However, you've got to remember, if you wait too long, you may not be able to manipulate your loyalties the way you need to as things evolve. Because this game can be range quite differently. As green
Players
can be
expand,
across the board, and then just a few moves later, things can change dramatically. So you really want to kind of hedge your bets when it comes to revealing those loyalties.
And you're going to play 4 rounds of that. At the end of the 4th round, everyone's going to reveal all of their tokens, whether they've swapped or not, and then you're going to add points depending upon which one of these cities they control, or how many cities they control. So for example, looking at my player board here, yellow, each city that yellow controls is worth 4 victory points. However, brown is worth -1 victory points for every one they control. And that's simply the game. If there's a tie at the end of the game, you're going to see whoever has more cards left in their hand, and that's determine the winner. It's a very interesting game for a couple different reasons. One, for the fact that the board changes quite often, and you're never quite sure how to manipulate or which families to support. Also, the positioning, you don't realize it the first time that you play, but brown starts with no banners on the board, and yellow starts with quite aggressively with a lot, but they're deadlocked in the center, meaning they're attacked on all different sides from all the players.
Yeah, it's interesting how they varied things up that way. The blues start with only 4, but all 4 of them are in one region, so you can start moving the blues around as sort of a military force a little bit more than you can some of the other regions. The other cool thing that you have to remember about this game is it's not about just trying to focus on your high point value families. You just as much might want to tank the low value families, particularly if you think those families are someone else's high value family. And there will be times in this game where you kind of look around, especially in a 4-player game, and you think, okay, these 2 guys are really trying to make green work, and one of them's revealed that green is their top value. I'm going to maybe help them along the way so that you can score those same points they do for green, and then maybe gather a few more points somewhere down the road that they're not gathering.
It also makes you think very differently. In the same instance, he may notice that his green is very low, so he may want to manipulate green by sending him into battles that he could never win, making sure that those armies or those banners get destroyed along the way. The other really cool thing about the game is the rotation of the board. I love the fact that as you're going, they all take place in a very specific order, meaning that blue, although it goes first and has a lot to start with, it gets progressively weaker as the round goes in because more people are manipulating the board and be able to change blue, and blue is done. Like once blue is done, it's done. You can't go back to this one and manipulate it anymore, which is very interesting.
Yeah, and there's also the cards need to be touched on one more time because the cards truly change things up. They allow you to do some things like mini games that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do, particularly that 3rd or final action on each of those cards can let you break some of the rules. In fact, I might be able to move one of my agents after I've used it to a completely another empire and use another space, even if it's already been triggered this round, that empire. So you can really change things up with the cards.
Don't think I've ever played an area control, area influence game quite like this where you're not manipulating the tokens yourselves. Very interesting game. It's called A War of Whispers. It's from Starling Games, 2 to 4 players on Kickstarter right now. If you have an itch to play a Game of Thrones style game and want to be one of those seedy characters, this is probably the game for you. If you guys have any questions about the game, make them in the comments below. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else that we do. And we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.